The torches flicker low tonight, along the temple walls. Their light barely touches the stone. I sit here beside the Nile, where the water moves in darkness, and I will tell you something whispered, something the priests spoke only after sunset, when the gods were not watching. A story of a pharaoh who lived too long, Pepi II, the boy who became king and never stopped being king. 94 years, some say longer, the longest reign Egypt ever knew, and the gods grew restless. The night air is cool. It moves through the papyrus reeds, carrying the scent of river mud. In the old kingdom, when the pyramids were still new, a child sat upon the Horus throne, 6 years old, maybe younger. His name was Pepi, son of Pepi I, born under strange stars. The priests watched those stars and said nothing, but they remembered. Listen, do you hear the water? It moves as it always has, since before the first dynasty, since before the gods walked as men. The Nile remembers everything. It remembered the day when the boy king was crowned, gold upon his small head, too heavy for a child, the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, pressing down, already beginning its curse. In the palace at Memphis, torches burned in every corridor, day and night. The boy did not understand why everyone bowed, why his mother spoke for him, why the viziers moved like shadows, deciding everything. He was just a child, playing with wooden toys. While Egypt turned beneath him, the gods watched, and they were patient. For now. Time moved slowly then, as it moves now, in this quiet darkness. Years passed like water. Pepi grew, from boy to young man. But Egypt did not change. The same viziers, the same priests, the same rituals, repeating. The kingdom held its breath. The temples still stood, massive and eternal, their columns rising into shadow. Inside, incense burned continuously, myrrh and frankincense drifting through the sanctuaries. The priests chanted at dawn, at noon, at sunset, their voices echoing in stone chambers, for the young Pharaoh, for his long life, for Mahat, for balance. But balance was already shifting. In the hall of the two truths, where judgment happens, the scales wait eternally, a feather on one side, a heart on the other. The priests knew these scales. They knew that everything, eventually, must be weighed, even a pharaoh, even a reign that never ends. The gods keep accounts in ways mortals cannot see. Pepi became a man, tall and strong, wearing the royal regalia. He learned the ceremonies, the sacred words, the gestures that commanded gods. He walked through the palace, where servants prostrated themselves, foreheads touching limestone floors. He was divine, the living Horus, son of Ra. But he was also still learning, still young, and the years kept coming. The wind moves across the desert tonight, carrying sand, carrying whispers. In Pepi's 20th year of rule, the officials grew comfortable. They had served since his childhood. They knew the rhythms of power. The vizier controlled the grain stores. The high priest controlled the temples. The generals controlled the borders. And Pepi, young still, ruled in name only. Egypt functioned like a great machine, without its king. But time has a weight. You can feel it, in old stone, in deep tombs. Another decade passed, then another. Pepi was 30 years on the throne, still strong, still healthy, still Pharaoh. The officials who crowned him were dying now, one by one, replaced by their sons. And those sons knew only Pepi, only his reign, only his endless rule. In the workshops of Memphis, artisans carved his name into every surface. Pepi, 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 cartouches multiplied like stars. His pyramid complex grew year after year, larger than his father's, almost as large as the Great Pyramid itself. Stones were cut, transported, laid in perfect courses. The work never stopped. Neither did the rain. The Nile flooded each year, as it always had, bringing black soil, bringing life. The farmers planted. The harvest came. Egypt prospered. Pepi performed the rituals, opening the dikes, blessing the fields, speaking the words of Happy, God of the inundation, year after year, the same ceremony, the same words, until they became automatic. Close your eyes, feel the coolness of the temple floor, smooth beneath your feet. 40 years now. Pepi had ruled for 40 years, longer than most men lived, and he was only middle-aged. The palace scribes counted the years in awe, writing them in red ink, as if they were festivals. No pharaoh had ruled so long, not Khufu, not Khafre, not even Djoser. Pepi was becoming something else. In the temples, the priests began to whisper, not loudly, never loudly, just small words between prayers. They noticed things, small things, the rhythm of the seasons, felt stuck, the same faces in the palace, growing old, but never replaced, the same policies, the same laws. Egypt was standing still, while Pepi lived, and lived, and lived. The desert stretches forever, in the darkness, beyond the reach of the Nile. Out there, in the distant provinces, nomarchs ruled their nomes, their territories, with increasing independence. Pepi was far away, in Memphis, growing old, growing distant. The governors sent tribute, but less frequently, less generously. They built their own monuments, made their own laws, while the pharaoh sat on his throne, decade after decade. Listen to the silence between the words. That's where the truth lives. 50 years, half a century, one pharaoh. The younger priests had never known another ruler. To them, Pepi was eternal, like Ra himself. But the older priests remembered. They remembered change. They remembered succession, the proper order of things. A king rules. A king dies. A new king rises. That was Mahat. That was balance. But Pepi did not die. In the palace gardens, lotus flowers bloomed, white and blue, opening at dawn, closing at dusk. Pepi walked there sometimes, an old man now, but still pharaoh. His beard was long and white, his hands marked with age spots, but the crown still sat upon his head. He performed the rituals, every one, precisely as always. The gods received their offerings. The temples received their gold, and time continued. 60 years. The scribes wrote it carefully, checking the count, rechecking. 60 years since his coronation. The Jubilee festival, the Heb said, was performed again and again, more times than any pharaoh in history. Each time, Pepi ran the ceremonial course, though now he walked it, slowly. His breath labored, but he completed it, proving his fitness to rule, and the gods watched. The torch beside me, gutters in the night wind, its flame dancing like time itself. In the provinces, the nomarchs no longer waited for Memphis to speak. They married their daughters to other nomarchs, building alliances, creating power structures, independent of the throne. They built tombs, as grand as royal tombs, decorated with scenes of their own glory. Pepi's name appeared, but smaller now, almost an afterthought. The Nile still flowed, dark and eternal, carrying secrets, 70 years, 3 full generations, under one Pharaoh. The great officials who served in his youth were long dead. Their sons were dead. Their grandsons now served. And Pepi, ancient now, still sat upon the throne. His mind was still sharp, but his body was failing. He needed help to walk, to stand, to perform the sacred rites. In the house of life, where scribes copied sacred texts, a new question arose, whispered, never written. What happens when a pharaoh rules too long? The text spoke of mahat, of balance, of the proper order. Kings were meant to be like the sun, rising, reaching zenith, setting. But Pepi's sun remained at noon, burning. For 70 years, the balance was disturbed. Close your eyes again. Feel the cool stone walls, ancient and patient. 80 years. The number seemed impossible, but the scribes confirmed it. 80 years of reign. Pepi was a living mummy now, fragile as papyrus, skin like dried leather. But still, he breathed. Still, he ruled. Still, he wore the crown. Servants carried him to ceremonies, propped him upright, while he spoke the ancient words, his voice, a whisper, but still divine. The temples filled with shadows, even at midday, as if the gods were turning away. The priests noticed. Offerings disappeared slower, as if the gods were not hungry. Prayers echoed longer, in empty chambers, unanswered. Something was wrong in the divine order, but no one spoke it aloud. To question the Pharaoh was to question Ma'at itself, so they whispered and waited and watched Pepi continue. 90 years, 9 decades, nearly a century. The number was sacred and terrible. Pepi had outlived everyone from his youth, everyone from his middle years, most from his old age. The current vizier was the grandson of the vizier who crowned him. The high priest had never known. Another pharaoh, Egypt itself, had forgotten how succession worked. Listen to the water, moving in darkness, eternal, like this rain. The pyramid was finished decades ago. But Pepi lived on. His burial chamber waited, empty, perfect. Walls covered in pyramid texts, spells for the journey that never came. The sarcophagus stood ready, granite polished smooth, lid carved with his titles, waiting, waiting, while Pepi breathed and ruled in the palace. At night, when the old pharaoh slept, the younger officials gathered. They spoke quietly of the future, of what came after. But after what? Pepi showed no signs of dying. Perhaps he couldn't die. Perhaps the gods had forgotten him. Perhaps he was already dead, and the body continued. Through habit alone, the thought terrified them. The wind carries sand tonight, fine as powder, settling on everything. Pepi was 94 years old. Some said more. The exact count was uncertain now. He ruled from his bed, a living mummy, barely conscious, but still Pharaoh. The court functioned around him, making decisions in his name, while he drifted between sleep and waking. The crown sat beside his bed, too heavy now to wear. In the temples, the rhythm faltered. Ceremonies were shortened, modified, because Pepi could not attend. The priests performed them alone, speaking for the pharaoh, acting as his hands, his voice, his presence. But the gods knew. The gods always knew. When the rituals were incomplete, the offerings still came, but smaller now. The prayers still rose, but weaker. Mahat was crumbling. Feel the coolness of the temple floor in the deepest night. The kingdom was fracturing, slowly, invisibly, like a jar with a hairline crack. The nomarchs ruled their territories as independent kings in all but name. The borders went undefended, the desert tribes raided, the southern fortresses fell into disrepair, and Memphis, the capital, maintained the illusion of unity while Pepi breathed. The Nile knows. It has seen dynasties rise and fall and rise again. In the 94th year, perhaps the 95th, the records are unclear, Pepi II finally died. Not dramatically, not with omens, just stopped breathing. One morning, the servants entered, and he was gone. The palace stood silent for a long moment, as if the world itself had paused. Then the wailing began. Ritual, mourning, loud and formal. But beneath it, beneath the ceremony, there was something else. Relief, confusion, fear. What now, after 94 years? What possibly came next? The embalmers came, with their tools, their natron, their sacred oils. They worked for 70 days, as tradition demanded, removing the organs, preserving the flesh, wrapping the body in layer after layer of finest linen. They placed amulets between the wrappings, protection for the journey that should have begun decades ago. In the darkness, the tomb waited, deep beneath the pyramid, corridors descending into earth, into stone. The burial chamber had been ready for 60 years. Dust covered the pyramid texts, the painted walls, the golden furniture, everything prepared for a death that took nearly a century to arrive. Listen to the silence between heartbeats. The funeral procession wound through Memphis, thousands following, the golden coffin. But the crowds were confused. Many had never known another Pharaoh. They mourned because they were told to, but they didn't understand what they had lost. Pepi had become a monument, not a man. The priest chanted the ancient words. As the body descended into the pyramid, down the corridors, past the false doors, through the chambers, into the burial room, they laid him in the granite sarcophagus. Finally, the lid was sealed with sacred words and copper pins, and Pepi II began his journey to the field of reeds, 94 years late. But the curse did not end with his burial. The damage was done to Mahat, to the balance, to Egypt itself. His successor, Merenra II, ruled for 1 year, maybe less, before he too died. Then Nitocris, a woman, perhaps legendary, perhaps real. The records fragment here. The old kingdom, that great age of pyramids, was ending, not with conquest, not with plague, but with exhaustion. Pepi's endless reign had drained something from the kingdom's soul. The nomarchs no longer recognized Memphis. The provinces became kingdoms of their own. The first intermediate period was beginning. Chaos after too much order. The torch flickers, lower now, its fuel almost spent. In the decades after Pepi's death, Egypt fractured completely. The two lands became 20 lands, 30 lands, each nome independent, each nomarch a king. The pyramids stood empty, robbed, abandoned. The temples fell silent, their priests scattered, their offerings ceased. The rain that lasted too long had broken everything. But this is not a story of blame. The gods do not blame. They simply maintain balance. Pepi was not evil, not cruel, not mad. He simply lived and ruled as he was meant to. But the gods have rhythms that mortals cannot change. The sun rises, the sun sets. Kings rule, kings die, new kings rise. This is Ma'at. Feel the night air, cool against your skin. In the temple darkness, the priests who remembered told this story, not as history, but as warning. Balance must be maintained in all things. Too little order, chaos. Too much order, stagnation. Too short a reign, instability. Too long a reign, decay. The gods require the proper rhythm. In later dynasties, when pharaohs ruled again, united Egypt, they remembered Pepi. His name was honored, his pyramid stood, his mortuary cult continued for centuries. But the priests added prayers for proper succession, for timely death, for the renewal that comes only through ending. The Nile flows as it always has, carrying water, carrying time. Pepi's mummy rested in the pyramid for thousands of years. The kingdom he knew fell, rose, fell again, rose again. Dynasties came and went, but Pepi remained, silent in stone, a warning, a mystery. Close your eyes and imagine the moment of his death. An old man, so old the word means nothing, lying in darkness, finally letting go. Did he know what he had done? Did he understand that his life, long and blessed, had cursed the kingdom? Or did he simply sleep, relieved that the burden was finally over? The wind moves through reeds, making sounds like whispers, like prayers. In the temples of later years, young priests learned the reign of Pepi II in their studies. 94 years. They repeated the number in awe, in fear. They learned the rituals that prevent such imbalance, the prayers for proper succession, the ceremonies of renewal, the sacred mathematics of time. But some things cannot be prevented, only witnessed. Pepi lived because he lived. The gods allowed it, for their own reasons, unknowable, unfathomable, perhaps to teach, perhaps to test, perhaps simply because the gods do not explain, they only act and mortals interpret. The torchlight grows dimmer still, shadows deepen. In the pyramid texts carved on Pepi's chamber walls, the spells speak of eternal life. Pepi does not die. Pepi lives forever. Pepi is like Ra. The ironies are painful. He lived almost forever, in mortal terms, and it destroyed everything he ruled. Listen to your breathing, slow, steady, like the Nile. The curse of Pepi II was not magic, not supernatural, but natural law. All things must end. To begin again, the flood must recede. For planting, the harvest must be cut. For eating, the king must die. For renewal, this is not cruel, it is necessary. In the silence between dynasties, Egypt learned. The Middle Kingdom pharaohs ruled wisely. For measured terms, they planned succession carefully, co-regencies with their sons, smooth transitions, preventing the chaos that comes from too much stability. They remembered Pepi and feared his blessing. The stars turn overhead, eternal and distant, watching everything, Pepi's pyramid still stands at Saqqara, smaller than Khufu's, but older in its ruin. The burial chamber was robbed in ancient times, the mummy destroyed, the treasure taken, but the pyramid texts remain, carved deep, prayers for a journey that took too long to begin. Feel the cool stone beneath your feet, timeless, patient. The story of Pepi II is not finished. Even now, millennia later, archaeologists study his reign, historians debate his impact. The fragments remain, inscriptions, statues, seals, each piece a whisper from the man who ruled too long. In the museum cases, small statues of Pepi sit in silence, alabaster and copper, wood and stone, each one showing him at a different age. The boy king, the young pharaoh, the aged ruler, time captured in material form. Visitors pass, reading the labels. Pepi II, 94 years, and they marvel, not understanding the weight of that number. The Nile breathes in the darkness, rising and falling with its own rhythm. What did Pepi think in his final years? Did he remember being 6 years old, too small for the crown? Did he recall his youth, his strength, the decades when he truly ruled? Or had memory faded, leaving only the present, eternal and empty? The priests knew that memory is sacred, and forgetting is its own death. They recorded everything on papyrus, on stone, in temple libraries. The annals of Pepi II filled scroll after scroll, year after year, repetitive, vast, a literature of endurance. But between the lines, the careful reader could see the slow decay. Listen to the space between sounds, where truth lives. In the 40th year, the records are full, detailed, confident. In the 60th year, the entries shorten, grow formulaic. In the 80th year, they are sparse, uncertain, as if the scribes themselves were tired of recording the same rain. The wind carries sand, always sand, the desert reclaiming what was built. Pepi's mortuary temple fell into ruin faster than others. The priests abandoned it, while he still lived, unable to maintain what seemed endless. The offerings ceased, the lamps went dark, and the car of Pepi, his spiritual double, went hungry, even before death. Close your eyes and feel the darkness, complete and soft, in the provinces, far from Memphis. The nomarchs built tombs with new inscriptions. They no longer waited for royal permission, for royal artisans. They carved their own autobiographies, boasting of independence, of local power, of self-sufficiency. Pepi's name appeared as a formality, nothing more. The gods watched from their temples, their shrines, their sacred spaces. Ra rose each day, traversing the sky, setting each night the proper rhythm. Osiris ruled the underworld, receiving the dead, judging the hearts, the proper cycle. But Pepi remained, breaking the pattern, disturbing the cosmic order. The gods were patient, but not infinitely so. The torch beside me burns lower, its light barely reaching the nearest wall. In the palace archives, the scribes kept a secret count, not just years, but costs. The expense of maintaining an elderly pharaoh was staggering. Physicians, servants, special foods, rare medicines, all pouring into one ancient body, while the provinces starved. The Nile still flooded each year, but the dikes went unrepaired, the irrigation channels silted up, the harvests diminished. Memphis still prospered for a time, but the countryside suffered, and Pepi, in his palace, noticed nothing, or if he did, lacked the strength to act. Feel the coolness of the temple floor, smooth and eternal. The younger officials, those born late in the reign, grew restless. They saw other kingdoms where succession happened, where new ideas, new policies, new energy renewed the state. But Egypt, under Pepi, was frozen, preserved, like a body, in natron, in the house of life. The scribes copied ancient texts over and over. Nothing new, nothing changed. Innovations ceased. Why create when nothing ever changes? Art became stagnant. Architecture repeated old forms. Literature recycled old stories. Egypt was becoming a museum of itself. The wind whispers through empty corridors, in abandoned temples. The military declined, without renewal, without reform. The generals grew old, comfortable, unwilling to fight. The borders, once firm, grew porous. Nubian tribes raided the south, Libyan clans probed the west, and Memphis did nothing. Listen to the water, lapping against stone, patient, inevitable. In the 90th year, a terrible thing happened. Not invasion, not plague, but nothing. The year passed, exactly like the year before, and the year before that. The officials realized, with horror, that they could predict every ritual, every ceremony, every decision. Egypt had become predictable. The gods value many things, but predictability is not among them. The universe thrives on change, on chaos balanced with order. Too much chaos. Destruction, too much order. Death. Pepi's reign was too much order for too long, and the gods finally withdrew their favor. Close your eyes and imagine the moment when the gods look away, not in anger, not in judgment, but in disinterest, when the prayers no longer reach them, when the offerings no longer please them, when Egypt becomes invisible. That is the true curse. The Nile flows, dark and ancient, knowing all secrets. In the final years, Pepi was barely conscious, fed liquids, kept alive, by force of will, not his will, the will of the court. Terrified of what came after, they had no plan, no prepared successor, no vision beyond Pepi. The torchlight flickers like a failing heart. When he finally died, the machinery of state seized up. No one knew the proper procedures. For succession, the rituals were nearly forgotten. The last time was 94 years ago. Ancient scrolls were consulted, old priests summoned to remember how to crown a new pharaoh. But it was too late. The damage done. The provinces would not return. The nomarchs had tasted independence for too long. They sent polite messages to Memphis, acknowledging the new pharaoh, but they did not send tribute or soldiers or obedience. Egypt was fractured. Feel the night air, cool and dry, against your face. The first intermediate period is what historians call it, a gentle name for chaos. The two lands became many lands, wars between nomes, famine, disorder. The pyramids stood, silent witnesses to the collapse of the world. They were built to honor. In the darkness, The Nile still flowed, unconcerned with dynasties. The water knew that this too would pass, that Egypt would rise again in the Middle Kingdom, reunited, renewed. But that was centuries away, centuries of darkness, following Pepi's too long light. Listen to the silence, deep and complete, like the silence in a sealed tomb. The priests of later ages studied the rain, looking for lessons. They found many, wrote treatises about balance, about ma'at, about the proper order. But they also found something else, pity for Pepi. Imagine being 6 years old and becoming divine, never choosing, never wanting, just being, and then living and living, unable to stop, unable to abdicate. Because pharaohs do not abdicate, divine kings do not resign. They rule until they die. And if death does not come, the torch is almost out, the flame barely visible, a glow, nothing more. Pepi was trapped by his own divinity, his own strength, his own longevity, a prisoner of life itself. The gods gave him years, and those years became his curse, not because they were evil years, but because they never ended. The Nile knows that all things must flow, must change, must move. Stagnant water becomes foul. Standing water breeds disease. Only moving water